On this episode of What the Ship, we look at the top 5 news stories as of August 23rd, 2024. Hi, I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. There is a lot of ship going on, and we're going to take a look at it. We've covered some past stories. We need to do updates. This is going to be an episode of updates. 5 stories with 5 updates need to be done. We're going to do them right here. Hey, if you're new to the channel, or if you are a subscriber to this channel, go check. Make sure you're still subscribed, because for some reason, I don't know why, YouTube likes to unsubscribe people. I don't know why they do it, but they do. But if you haven't subscribed, hey, go ahead, subscribe and hit that button so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So the first story I want to talk about deals with the issue with the Canadian railways. So did a video on this the other day. Canada goes off the rails. I made a mistake and I said that the Teamsters Union in Canada went on strike. That's not what happened. What happened in Canada was the 2 major Canadian railways did a lockout. And I heard about this in the comments. Somehow I managed to make Canadians mad. I didn't think that was possible, but I did. I made Canadians mad. I'm kind of proud of that fact. I didn't think anyone could do it, but I did. I want to apologize for that. However, we have some news stories about what is going on. So here's the story over at FreightWaves. Canadian Labour Minister puts an end to the CN and the CPKC work stoppage. Railroads must resume operations and end binding arbitration with Teamsters Canada. So here's the story. The Canadian government has moved to end Canada's freight rail work stoppage, the first to shut down both the Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City simultaneously. So basically what we're seeing is Labour Minister Steve McKinnon sent a dispute to binding arbitration. The Teamsters Canada Rail Conference says it will maintain picket lines while it reviews McKinnon's action. We don't know whether this will lead to an actual strike where the Canadian workers step out. Right now, they have been ordered to go back to work. Then we have this story. Canada rail shutdown may still delay Western grain exports. The shutdown that has occurred is causing basically a snowball effect, an accordion, butterfly effect, whatever you want to call it, across Canada. And we're already seeing that. We had seen the ramping down, the slowing up of freight shipments because they didn't want to move cargo into rail cars. And so this is going to have an impact across the board. At the same time, over in the Port of Vancouver, meanwhile, the Port of Vancouver was also preparing for this issue. As we see here in a statement from the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, we are concerned about the prospect of further labor disruptions impacting port and supply chain operations. The impact to the Port of Vancouver will be significant, with approximately 2/3 of all cargo volumes at the port moved by rail, including 90% of international exports. So this disruption in Canada is going to have an impact, and it will not remain in Canada. What happens in Canada doesn't remain in Canada. It's going to go out. We're already going to see some impacts with ship shifting schedules, delays, and impacts. Now heading off to arbitration. Question is, does Teamsters honor the arbitration? Are they going to go to into the arbitration and have the discussion? They've got a picket line out there. Question is anybody going to cross the picket line? That creates other problems with other unions. This is a developing story we're going to be watching. Obviously, we're talking about Canada having a strike, but of course, the U.S. East Coast and Gulf Coast, the ILA, the International Longshoremen's Association, is preparing for a potential similar issue because of the breakdown in negotiations with the USMX, the United States Maritime Alliance. That expires on September 30th. That has big impact, as we'll see going on. All right, let's go ahead and jump over to our second story. The second story deals with the Yacht Bayesian that sank off the coast of Sicily. I just got off from doing an interview on CNN. I had done an earlier interview with CNN International the other day. I posted it on my channel for you to see. And again, the reason I did CNN is CNN called. And so they called, I did the interview with them. And we're talking about the developments that are happening in this. I'm going to give you the updates as I know them here, but if you really want to follow who I think is the best person to follow when it comes to all thing yachts, head over to E. Sisman at Super Yachts. He is the best at this. What I do with global shipping, he does with yachts, and he is great at it. He is a person in the industry. He works it. He's got the inside of it. He does great production value and graphics. Really, I mean, top notch. My hat's off to him. I think he does a great job. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the story has been developing. So here's a story over at Yahoo News. What we know about the Bayesian yacht, Captain James Cutfield. Now, Cutfield, 50s-year-old captain from New Zealand, well experienced by all accounts, has been talking with the Italian police. Right now, the last of the 6 other bodies have been recovered, so a total of 7 dead on board the yacht. A lot of issues that are being raised here that we're going to take a look at. Latest story out of CNN talking about the final body being recovered. There was very little prospect for recovery of survivors. When the yacht rolled on its side and went down as quick as it could, there were air pockets that were formed probably, but there would not be much oxygen in them for the survivors to use. And more importantly, this happened while they were sleeping. So you would have had people violently thrown out of beds. The debris in the room would have gone from where you're sitting now to all of a sudden go 90 degrees. And then you add water into this. It is a horrific way to die. And I can't even tell you how much I hate talking about this story, because it is just a nightmarish scenario for everybody involved. So BBC raised this story here, Bayesian sinking, the key question for investigators. So one of the questions that they ask is, was the keel up? And if so, why? Now, this is a really important question. This sailboat had the tallest aluminum mast ever. I mean, this thing is massive, 236 or 37 feet. It is ridiculous. Understand something. On super yachts, it's a matter of size. Owners of super yachts are trying to show their wealth through the size of their yachts. Motor yachts, you're not going to compete with some of the motor yachts out there because they're owned by heads of government. You're talking about things the size of small cruise ships. But the big thing that everyone is getting into are sailing yachts, because sailing yachts are not as expensive. They're ridiculously expensive, don't get me wrong, but compared to a motor yacht, they're a little cheaper. But more importantly, you can show them off. And one of the things they like to show off is the size of their mast. Read into that what you want. In the case of Bayesian, this large mast, even though there were not sails hoisted at the moment, that mast, along with the rigging up there, the radars, the satellite, is all going to catch wind. Now, people are asking the question, well, wait a minute, Sal, this thing has a retractable keel. The keel comes down on this vessel. Yeah, it's true the keel comes down, but you only tend to lower that keel when you're under sail. When you're not under sail, you have it hoisted up. Why? Because it creates drag, and you don't need it. You don't need it for stability. You don't need it to keep the ship level. You will not use it at all. And so it's not going to be surprising to find that the keel was up. I'm not 100% sure the keel prevents this ship from going over when the wind hits it. Remember, this thing was hit by a sea spout. It's a tornado formed at sea. It starts in the air, comes down to the water, and instead of picking up debris, picks up water. So you basically have a sea tornado coming at you. And even if the crew was up and alert for this, unless they had everybody up on deck with life jackets on, you're not maneuvering around this thing, and remember, when you look at tornado damage in communities, it can hit a house, destroy and flatten a house, but the houses right next door are fine. The chances of getting hit by one of these head on is really, really small. It's minute, but it can happen, as we see happen here. Other question that's asked, what measures did the crew take? Now, this ship has a stern door and a port side, left side, back aft access hatch. Those are down to the waterline. In evenings, as standard operating for ship crews, those should be secure. They should be taken up, they should be dogged down, and they should be secured and watertight. The question is, does the crew have a mate on watch, for example, on the bridge, ensuring that they're keeping an eye on things? Remember, this wasn't a charter yacht. This is a private yacht with a private crew with passengers on board who were guests. They're not paying. So rules are a bit different here for a private yacht in this ownership. The other question you have is, even if you have a seaman or a mate on watch, are they going to roust everybody up, get them to go put life jackets on and stand by? That depends on the orders of the master, the captain of the vessel. It also depends on the owner, whether or not the owner is going to want to do that. If you have a master or owner who doesn't want to deal with this, you may not go wake them up for fear of losing your job. I know that sounds horrible, but it is a true fact of life that you don't want to kind of anger your employer. And in this case, unfortunately, most people were sleeping below deck. Some were up on deck enjoying the evening air, but most of them found themselves below deck having to get out of the ship very quickly. How did the boat sink so quickly? Well, even if those hatches, the stern port and the port side aft hatch wasn't open, this vessel does not have watertight compartments, for example, doors everywhere on the vessel. So this diagram shows you the vessel. If you look back aft here, this kind of lower area, kind of dining area, there is a door here. There's kind of a two-way glass door, or a glass door that partitions, opens up. That's not a watertight door. And if this vessel goes on its beam, if it is 90 degrees, it gets knocked over on its side, water is going to start filling in through there. Plus, there are access ports and stairways and doors, and if the hatches aren't properly secured, you're going to get flooding through the vessel. Plus, there are access points for air coming in. It's not 100% watertight throughout the vessel. You tend to have the watertight doors up forward, areas where this vessel will come down, but probably in an evening like this, not exactly watertight. Plus, the windows here can be broken. They can bash in. So you may not have the watertight integrity you think you have. And once the vessel is on its side and it starts flooding, once water ingresses into this vessel, it's going to fill up pretty quickly. Remember, bulkheads are designed when the ship is upright and it gets hit in the side and you keep the water from flooding in. A ship on its side, that water is going to be coming from the top down as opposed from the side. And then third, did weather cause freak accident? I think you can clearly say it was the weather that caused this. The question is, was there a human or a mechanical factor that came into this? Were hatches not properly secured? Was there not enough warning taken care of? Now, at the same time, the builder of the vessel is coming out and saying that this vessel sank because of incredible mistakes made by the crew. The CEO of Italian Sea Group, who owns the manufacturing plant that builds this type of vessel, Giovanni Castino, has been out in full force talking about that is crew negligence and mistakes that have caused this, and it's leading to an investigation in Italy about potential manslaughter charges for the crew regarding this. These events always get nasty, and we're seeing that come out right now. The other element, too, is whether or not the mast snapped. There was a discussion early on that the mast, the 236-foot mast, snapped, and that's what caused the vessel to go down. I got to tell you that if the mast had snapped, it actually improves the stability of this vessel. It is pushing at the very end of that mast. It's the irony is that this mast is so strong that it may have actually brought down the vessel. You did not need this size of a mast on this vessel. It was really a matter of issue of pride and wanting a big, huge, massive mast. They used power to hoist the sails on it. You could have gotten by with a smaller mast or two masts, which with equal size sails to power this vessel. It is a very difficult issue. And then the recovery took so long because of the depth. We're talking about 160 feet down, so almost 50 meters where it went down. And the fact that this vessel did not break apart, went down in one piece, made access into the vessel very difficult. And it may have been the case that they actually had to cut into the side of the vessel to get access into the crew areas and the sleeping compartments for the passengers to recover everyone. This is a horrific story. It is not a great story. And it gets a lot of attention because of the owner of the vessel, Mike Lynch, and because of what happened with him. Let me be clear. Nobody can control a sea spout hitting a vessel at anchor and knocking it over. This is a weird coincidence. I know he was under investigation, all of that, but there's a lot to this story. This is an event kind of akin to what we saw with Titan last summer going down, except that this vessel was meeting all the safety standards and precautions that you want. Well inspected, vessel had undergone a rebuild not too long ago. It was just hit by a force that very few vessels can survive. And the odds of getting hit by a sea spout on the ocean is really rare. But the idea that you're going to get up anchor and try to dodge it and get out there, that's not going to likely happen. And so the best thing that we are going to see come out of this is maybe some precautionary measures and hopefully do a little bit better in taking warnings for crews. All right, let's go ahead and jump over to our next story. Our next story takes us to the Red Sea and potentially the third ship being sunk by the Houthis since their initiation of operations against commercial shipping back in November of 2023. We've already seen two ships sunk. The Ruby Mar went down, bulk carrier was sunk by the Houthi, and then the Tudor, another vessel that was hit by the Houthi, was sunk, but now a third vessel may have joined them. This story over in G-Captain, abandoned tanker Sounion pose environmental risk after Red Sea attack. So the Greek-flagged oil tanker carrying 150,000 tons of crude. To put that in perspective, Exxon Valdez was carrying around 80,000 tons of crude when it went aground off of Valdez, Alaska back in 1989. Was evacuated by its crew after being attacked in the Red Sea, now poses an environmental hazard, the EU's Red Sea Naval Mission Aspide said on Thursday. Sounion was targeted on Wednesday by multiple projectiles off Yemen's port city of Hodeidah, where the Iran-alleged Houthi have been attacking ships in solidarity with the Palestinians in a war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. This marks a massive problem for the area, and we just found out that the Houthis have boarded the Sounion and, much like they did with Tudor, set explosive charges. This is the video that the Houthi have released. You'll see about 3 large explosions take place on the vessel. Those were not missiles. They were set off to be blown at the same exact time. You can see the fire up on deck. The question is whether or not they were able to penetrate the top of the deck into the oil compartments. Crude oil is very hard to set on fire. You have to get a big temperature to do it. This can definitely do it. The question is whether or not this is enough to go ahead and lead to the sinking of the vessel. This raises a big question, but whether or not the U.S. and the allies are putting forces sufficient to deter the Houthis. I did a video not too long ago, what I call the tale of two carriers, where I talked about the deployment of the Eisenhower strike group. When the Eisenhower went in, that was full-bore combat, almost 9 months from November of 2023 until the ship left. You had destroyers, U.S. destroyers down there, the Carney, you name it, a whole batch of them that were down there fighting almost on a daily basis. However, the U.S. Navy has basically evacuated the area. There's a large U.S. naval presence. The Theodore Roosevelt battle group came in. It's stationed up in the Persian Gulf to deter Iran. There was 2 U.S. destroyers that came through the Red Sea, but they chucked right through. And one, the Cole, is up in the northern Red Sea. But that's really to guard Israel against a potential attack of drones from the Houthi. And then you have a large naval presence in the Mediterranean, which means that it is not clear whether or not the United States has just abrogated the defense of the region. And I'll be clear, I wasn't crazy about the mission to begin with. I said that if you try to protect all the shipping going through the Red Sea, you're probably not going to be able to protect everything. And what we have seen based on the attacks is Houthi attacks are still continuing. Here's the report from the Joint Maritime Information Center. These are all the attacks since 19 November of 2023. We're up to 92 as of August 15th. This does not include the Sounion on here, but you'll see the number of serious attacks. In this case, Marlin Luanda, the Ruby Mar, True Confidence, Tudor, Verbena, and obviously we're going to attach the most recent attack to it. One of the things to notice is the assessed association. How many of the ships are actually connected to Israel? How many are connected to the United Kingdom? How many to the United States? And how many have either no direct association or outdated association? And what that means is that there's no connection. The Houthi have said that they're attacking initially Israeli ships. Then they add the US, UK because of the attacks on Yemen. But about 45% of all the attacks perpetrated by the Houthi are hitting ships that have nothing to do with Israel or the United States or the United Kingdom. Here are all the attacks that have taken place. The vast majority of them are in the Red Sea, going down to the Bab el-Mandeb, and then over into the Gulf of Aden. The most eastern and southernmost you'll see is just there, right by the Horn of Africa, and the most northern is just above the Yemen border. And then again, this data kind of shows you the type of ships that are being hit. Bulk carriers are the main ones. They represent about a third. Tankers are about a third. Containers about a quarter. And then the rest are ro-ros and others. But again, you see that big chunk there of gray for Israel. About 1/3 of all the ships being attacked are linked back to Israel. About 21% or 22% are linked to the US and UK. And then 45% have no connection whatsoever. And then if you look at the pace of attacks, early on, we saw a lot of attacks back in December, January, and February. Then the attacks kind of leveled off, and then a spike back in June. And we're on track here in August to outdo July and potentially go above the average. So we're definitely seeing an uptick in the level of attacks. With that, we're even seeing Russian oil beginning to take the longer route around. A lot of people were talking about the fact that Russians are sailing their ships through. Well, the Russians don't want to lose their oil either. So we're definitely seeing the impact. The vast majority of Chinese ships don't go through this region, especially the big ones. No major container ship over 6,000 TEU have really gone through here without direct escort by navies. At the same time, we're seeing ships route around Africa. The CMA CGM Bellum just lost 99 containers off of it. We had an earlier loss of containers off the CMA CGM Benjamin Franklin. This is going to happen because of the rough weather traversing around the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope. And then we're seeing impact in ports. San Pedro, the ports of LA and Long Beach, are seeing a wave of imports coming in. That is beginning to cause congestion. Talked about that in an earlier video. And then we have Maersk coming out talking about the fact that global trade is resilient amid the economic challenges. Leave it to Maersk always to be the bearers of positivity when coming out. They will be the bearers of bad news and positivity. They are the tale of two container ships in some ways. But it is definitely seeing an impact. And this third sinking of the vessel is important. Some people are going to ask, hey, why didn't they try to salvage the Sounion and pull it out? You're not going to bring salvage assets, commercial salvage assets, into the region without protection, and they're just not going to risk themselves. You really need naval assets in there to be able to tow them off. But the Sounion, which is Greek flagged, I might say too, and owned by a Greek company who Delta Tankers, this is the third tanker they've gotten hit. What's going on with Greek tanker owners? I think you should start getting the hint that it's not safe to sail through the region. But the question is, are we going to see more protection now because a Greek vessel was hit than before? This does not trigger NATO Article 5. Attacks on ships are not the same as attack on land. All right, let's jump to our next story. All right, our next story takes us to Gaza and the infamous, at this time, Gaza Pier. This has been a long, protracted event that has taken place, and I have covered it quite a bit. I mean, there are quite a few stories that I have done on the Gaza Pier, and I very early on sat there and said that the Gaza Pier was going to be a problem, and that we really should. Man, I did a lot of stories about the Gaza Pier. I also need a film editor of some kind because this is just not good here. Can we cut these out of here? Thank you. I said from the early beginning, the use of the JLOTs, the Joint Logistics Over the Shore Pier, was going to be a problem. And let me be clear, JLOTs works. When the system operates as designed, works great. The problem is when you try to use it in a way it's not designed, it doesn't work very well. It is designed to operate up to sea state 3. They went into an area where the average sea state was 3, which sounds like that should work. The problem with an average is sometimes you get a 2, sometimes you get a 1, sometimes you get a 4 or 5. And unfortunately, the military did not have a plan of what to do when the sea state went high. And what happened was the pier broke apart and they had to rebuild it. The other element they had here was limitations put on them. Number one, they couldn't step ashore, which really wasn't an issue for putting the pier in, but what it created an issue was when the pier wasn't in operation, you could use other watercraft to go directly on the beach. That was a problem. The other limitation they had is because they couldn't go on the beach, they had to bring trucks from the beach out to the vessels, load them, turn them around, and come back. J-Lots is kind of a one-way street. It's designed to flow cargo in one direction. When you start flowing it in two directions and using vehicles that are not military specification, it just collapses. But the story that's out now is dealing with this. The Army's pier system is now facing a second watchdog review after the troubled Gaza mission. So there's going to be an investigation into this. And I am hoping not to get called into this. But I have a feeling that this mission is going to get a lot of scrutiny. The other element here is that the U.S. military now has to contract for a vessel to haul back some of the Army craft that are out there stuck in the Mediterranean because it's hurricane season and no one wants to sail these small watercraft back in a hurricane. Here's the story over at Fox. U.S. Army boats involved in the Gaza humanitarian pier mission are slated to be hauled back. Though the timeline remains unclear, a defense official said the U.S. will be contracting a float-on, float-off vessel, a flow, because it is safer and more cost-efficient. The three boats in question, these are the LCU 2000s, the Monterey, the Matamoros, and Wilson's Wharf, are docked in Suda Bay in Crete. The three boats are flat-bottomed with low sides, which make for unsafe conditions for the crew traveling in rough waters. Let's go over to marine traffic, talk a little bit about what we have. So most of the vessels in question, those LCU 2000s, are right here in the Eastern Mediterranean. You really don't want to be heading out into the Atlantic and hurricane season. One of the LSVs, the larger, deeper draft logistics support vessel, the Besson, is making its way across. The Low is at right now Rota, waiting to make its passage. The Gross is sitting up in Naples, waiting to get across. The other vessels that were involved, Benavides is heading back across the Atlantic. The two maritime pre-positioning ships, the Stockham and the Lopez, are back in Jacksonville. And then the Cape Trinity, a vessel that was loaded with cargo and relief supplies, is sitting right now in port in the Eastern Mediterranean. There are plans to bring it into Israel to offload the rest of the support material, the humanitarian aid, through a port the way they should have done it in the first place, in my opinion. The Fox news story has that information in there. But, I mean, if you're going to bring logistics in and help what's going on in Gaza, you want to do it through a port, either through Israel or through Egypt. Going over the shore, you can do it, but the problem was you put so many restrictions on them, and then you put them in an environment which wasn't protected, open to the seas. You're kind of dooming it to failure at the very beginning. And that's why I think this investigation is going to be really interesting to it. All right, let's go ahead to our last story. All right, our last story deals with two stories I've done already, and one just recently, a story about the broken icebreakers in the U.S. Coast Guard, and then a story just came out regarding the state of the military Sealift Command. I did two videos not too long ago on this. One where I was talking to the union of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary mariners who went on strike recently because of pay issues, and I talked about the situation facing mariners in the military Sealift Command. And then a video I did a year or two ago now where I talked about the role of military Sealift Command. I've been talking about the issue regarding pay in the military Sealift Command for a long time. Well, two stories broke that deal with both of these, icebreakers and military Sealift Command. This is a story over at G-Captain. This congressional report details new delays and cost overruns for the Coast Guard icebreaker. So Molt Humbert put this together. A new Congressional Budget Office report details further cost overruns and delays. And this thing is, it is, I'm not gonna lie, it's terrible. I mean, it is just friggin' terrible. But let me share the terrible with you. So first off, according to a CBO report, as of July 2024, the vessel's design remains at only 59% complete, even less than the 67% the GAO reported in May. Somehow we went backwards. So somehow we have lost 8% of the design of the ship. Then the next part is probably the most disturbing. The new report says cost overruns for the procurement of the three polar security cutters is at $5.1 billion. That is 60% over the estimate that they had. The increase comes in part due to late-stage design changes, increasing the vessel size by 40% from 13,000 to 18,000 tons. The lifetime costs for operation and mission support will total $12.4 billion over the course of the program. The service says it may need up to 5 heavy icebreakers. Costs would nearly double to 21.2%. I mean, I don't even know how to register that amount of money for an icebreaker. The Coast Guard is looking to buy a commercial one. The commercial one, when it was built, cost $200 million. And they're talking about $5.1 billion to build it. And I know everyone's going to go screaming, it's because of the U.S. You can't build ships in the U.S., all this stuff. Let me be clear. This has to do with management. It has to do with many things. We built a medium icebreaker, the Healy, late 1990s, early 2000s. We built Polar Sea and Polar Star 50-something years ago. So we don't build that many icebreakers. But for heaven's sakes, make a deal with the Finns and work on getting this cost down and stop adding on to these platforms. Come up with your specifications, go get a private firm, let them contract this out and build it, kind of like they did with the National Maritime Security vessel. They are just overbuilding this thing to a point that you're not going to get a heavy icebreaker ever. And Healy just came back with a fire. Polar Sea and Polar Star, one of them only works, and we're probably not going to see the second one ever come out again. This is not good. And so we need to get the icebreaker program under control. Awarding it to VT Halter, who then gets bought by Bollinger, who have never built an icebreaker like this, is a problem. The last one that built an icebreaker was Avondale, and Avondale went away. So that is a horrific story. And then you have this story right here from USNI News. Navy could sideline 17 support ships due to manpower issues. I've been talking about this for a long time. Okay, this has been an issue for not the length of this channel, which has been gone for 3 years. Dave Lauder wrote about this 6 years ago, but this has been an issue when I sailed with Military Sealift Command 30 years ago. I mean, back in the late 80s, early 90s. Everybody knew the leave policy was crap. And now what is happening is that MSC has fixed the leave policy at time, not by fixing it, but by throwing money at the problem and hiring people. Well, now they're churning through people at such a rate that they're having serious crewing issues, to the point that they're going to have to take out of service 17 vessels in what they're calling a force generation reset. 2 Lewis and Clark class replenishment ships that are in the prepositioning fleet are going away. A fleet oiler, 12 of the Spearhead class expeditionary fast transports. Just to be clear, there's only 15 of them. 3 of them are already laid up. So you're talking about laying up ships that are just being built. One of them just got built in January, just came in service, and you're talking about losing those. And then 2 forward deployed Navy expeditionary sea bases would enter extended maintenance. They're talking about the Puller and the Woody Williams out in the Middle East and Africa. There's no friggin' way those 2 ESBs are going away. I don't care what everybody thinks. The Central Command and AfricaCom is never going to let those things go away. The only option here is they're taking new ones and replacing them with Puller and Williams. But they got to have the new ones to replace them. This is... And let me be clear. I'm quoted in this article, and I know Military Sealift Command is not my biggest fan. I understand that because they don't like that I say what the issue is. But you got to fix the issue. I'm not the problem. The problem is the issue. The issue here is that... Now, I'm going to be 100%. I think Admiral Sobek, the commander of Military Sealift Command, is one of the very first commanders who's doing something about this. Sobek is the man. He is actually addressing this issue. And the reason he is taking 17 ships out of service is because he cannot get the authorization to hire more. MSC has a crewing allowance of 1.22 people per billet. They want to go to 1.5. That's the only way you get to 4 months on, 2 months off. That is not going to happen because the military is not going to fund those extra people. And not only are you not going to fund those extra people, but you got to get the extra people. And the problem is they have so burnt the bridge on recruiting people that they can't get new bodies in. What they need to do is a whole reset of this situation. They really do. They need, and there's an opportunity to do that right now. What Admiral Sobek is doing in conjunction with U.S. Fleet Forces Command, it's not MSC that's doing this. It is U.S. Fleet Forces that are doing this, the parent command of MSC for these vessels. MSC has multiple commanders, Transcom, and then U.S. Fleet Forces. Fleet Forces is giving the permission to go ahead and do this. By the way, the Navy's not happy about this story getting out. They are angry because they wanted to release this story probably on Friday next week before the long holiday. But this story needs to be told, because what Sobek is doing and what MSC is doing is taking those mariners, putting them into the pool, so now they can improve leave. And if you improve the leave stature, if you can get people relieved on time, that improves morale, it improves everything. And then you can start addressing the problem of recruiting more. It's at that point, once you improve the leave status, you need a policy, a program to go hit the state maritime schools, SIU, the training facilities for the unlicensed, and start bringing in more people and reset what MSC is. MSC is a great institution and organization. I'm doing a history of them right now. Did 3 episodes of that, got 2 more coming out. I met my wife on an MSC ship. I love MSC. I think it is an unheralded organization. I think the mariners get treated like crap, not just because of the leave. I think they get treated like crap by the Navy too. They don't get the privileges and honors they deserve. How many mariners got a Merchant Marine Expeditionary Medal for sailing out in the Red Sea during the Houthi crisis? Did the crew of the Supply get it? Did the crew of Kanawha get it? The crew of Patuxent get it? Did the Alan Shepard get it? Did the console tanker get it? No. They need to get recognition. They also needed to be treated like humans. The gangway up order that took place during COVID under Admiral Wetlaufer's command was terrible. And there have been past issues. It's not the responsibility of any single one commander or purpose. It is a issue that has been percolating throughout this time. And I think this issue needs to be dealt with. And I think it's absolutely crucial that it does. And I hope that it gets resolved. Remember, this is happening at the same time we're seeing delays in the introduction of new platforms in the Military Sealift Command. The Navajo class salvage vessels are running behind. We don't have them out there to replace the current salvage assets. Why is it you can't get a salvage vessel to pull the Sounion out? There's no salvage vessels to do it. We just laid up the last salvage vessel in the Middle East. So they're not out there. The new Oilers aren't out there, the Lewis class, because they're having issues. They need crews for them. That's an issue going on. So there's a variety of issues, not to mention the least our Sealift assets are 44 years old on average, and we're scrapping them and laying up faster than we can replace them. There are holistic issues we need to address. So there is a lot going on regards to shipping. Those are the 5 updates I have for you. It is a lot. I know it's a lot of ship, but I hope you appreciated it today. So with that, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, and be sure to go check your subscription, because again, pesky YouTube is cutting people out. Subscribe and like, give it a thumbs up, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you hit that super thanks button right down there. You can contribute directly to the page, or head on over to Patreon, become a monthly, yearly subscriber to the channel. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Stay tuned for more as they come out. This is Sal, signing off.